So Doug, thank you very much for making time to share your insights into the future of leadership. But before we go into leadership, can you tell us a little bit more about your own background? Where did you grow up?
Nick, thanks very much for the opportunity. Firstly, I grew up in Port Elizabeth, which is my hometown. I went to school there, I went to university, I did my first 2 degrees at the then UPE, it's now Mandela University. And then I also had my first job there at Firestone. So that was 30 years ago. I started working in 1989 after my degrees. And then I made the move up to Johannesburg. So I come from the Eastern Cape.
So what was your dream career as you grew up?
Yeah, I don't think I had one thing in mind. It wasn't that I woke up and I said I wanted to be an accountant or a fighter pilot or whatever. It was more a question of, I think it evolved over time. I was always interested in marketing, more the advertising side and brands. I was acutely aware of different brands. So, I could tell you at 20, 30 meters what particular sneakers what a person was wearing in the model. So in the athletics brands where I was always very actively interested. And I think it grew from there, And then when I started studying, a lot of the subjects I found came quite easily to me, So a lot of the general business subjects, the psychology, consumer behavior, purchase patterns, buying, those sort of subjects I found were easy for me. I did a lot better.
What did you study?
My first degree was a general BCom with a major in business and industrial psychology. And ironically, my first job was in the industrial psychology side. I was in the HR and training department at Firestone. Very interesting story. And we can touch on that a little bit if you like. And then only later on, I got into the sales and marketing route. So I got via sales into marketing, and most of my career over the 30 years has been in that sort of commercial space of marketing and sales.
So you started off as an industrial psychologist, right?
Well, I wasn't a qualified industrial psychologist, although I studied the degree. As a young person, my first job was into Firestone. And interesting times, if you cast your mind back to South Africa in 1989 in the Eastern Cape, always a volatile area. The motor trade was the predominant industry there. So, I was at Firestone. There was Goodyear Tires, Continental, the tire space, Ever Ready in the battery space, Shatterproof in the water, and then obviously the big motor manufacturers. General Motors was there, as Ford Motor Company was there, and VW, Newton. So a lot of the activity centered around the motor trade, and for me it was quite a learning experience. As a young guy coming out of university, you're suddenly dealing with a multitude of different people on the factory floor. And at the time, I must be honest with you, I didn't think of it as a leadership point of view. I thought it was a punishment almost. I didn't enjoy going into the factory. It was dirty and noisy and hot. This is a tire factory, and I figured that I'd spent 3 years at university, and I was then doing my doctorate, that I wanted to do something else. And I think one of the lessons that you learn in hindsight, and one of the lessons for people today, is you've got to sometimes pay your dues. You've got to wait your turn. You can't think because you've just walked out of university with a piece of paper. The world owes you something. And only later on did I appreciate those lessons, Nick. They were invaluable. Invaluable lessons in terms of blue collar and white collar, the interaction those days, the interaction with unions. You must understand that it was a very unionized environment with different unions. And so it was a growing up learning curve that I think was exponential. And I think the thing with HR and the thing with training, you have a ticket into all the areas. In other words, you had access. I was allowed into production meetings. I was allowed to talk to the sales guys. I was allowed to talk to the tire builders, the quality control, into the warehouse. And those things, only over a period of time did you actually get to enjoy. And even in the moment, you force yourself to in the moment, and you realize that this is actually the textbook talking to you, because up until then you're a young guy who's a theorist,
So you were in charge of training?
I wasn't in charge, Nick. I was a young guy coming up, but I worked in both the recruitment side for a bit and in the training side. And again, it was unbelievable. And I'll give you one example of why I say it was unbelievable. Back to 1989, Nelson Mandela was still in jail. Apartheid was the prevalent thing in South Africa. And because Firestone was part of an American company, we'd started already thinking about when things changed in South Africa. And one of the things we did, today it's called diversity training, those days was called stereotype reduction, done by a skilled psychologist, where we worked in groups, and again, I often use this lesson, and I often talk to people about the rawness of bringing people in a room, white people, black people, management supervisors, women in business, things that in 2019 we're still discussing, the role of women in business. It's nothing short of ridiculous that we're still debating it globally. In those days, we spoke about that in an open forum, over a few days, skilled facilitator, because you can just imagine when you start putting up overtly contentious issues on a board and you start asking people what is their view, you're going to get divergent views, and it's going to degenerate into chaos, which it did. Now, when I say to you, you've got people who work in a physical environment. A tire factory is people who work in hot, dirty conditions, and they don't sit around and always negotiate over a table. Sometimes it gets quite physical, and so certainly the skilled facilitator took us through the session, and the lessons that I learned will stay with me forever. It's like yesterday. I can remember the day, how it went, the emotions, to get to a point of conciliation, a point of mutual respect, a point of agreement, and not just focus on the differences. Because as you go into those sessions, he would point out and elicit the obvious differences, but with a view to coach everybody to the then perhaps not so obvious similarities. And I think that's what business in the world needs. That's where the root of many conflicts is, about focusing on differences as opposed to trying to understand the similarities
together.
Of course it is, and a lot of the things we talk about are human truths. They you just know they are, because it's that golden rule, do unto others as you'd like them to do unto you. Perhaps taught to many of us when we're 3, 4, and 5. So you don't have to go to business school to learn about these things. And that's why it's always amazing when you talk about an ethics course in business school. I mean, a lot of the stuff, if it feels wrong, it probably is wrong. And second to that is, in today's world, I still am amazed that many companies have not gone through this journey that I've spoken to you about now. Sometimes you have to pull off the plaster, and it's a little bit sore to get to the healing process. And I will always look at that lesson, and it will be a very valuable one for me back in Firestone in the late 80s.
So that in those early days, who inspired you?
A multitude of people. There wasn't one particular person. I was pretty good at academics at school and university, so my family always encouraged me. But you must understand, Nick, we came from a very middle-class South African family, so we didn't have lots of money, and so even to go to a university, I'd apply, and I remember it, I applied at the Main Street branch of the then Barclays Bank in Port Elizabeth to get a 3-year loan for my degree. So I stayed at home, so it wasn't a resident, but books, tuition fees, all the rest. A 3-year degree in that period of time was 6,400 Rand. But it was a lot of money for us because we didn't have 6,400 Rands free cash. So it wasn't one particular person, but I think it's that ecosystem. And also, once I started doing better, I had a self-belief. I had a belief that I could, and I enjoyed it. And I think one of the lessons to talk to the leaders of tomorrow is to try and find something that you both like and good at. Don't try to do something that you think is going to make you money, but you absolutely hate it. Or something, on the other hand, that you're passionate about and love, but you can't commercialize it. You actually can't make a living out of it. So, I was fortunate in that space to fall in quite a generalist category. And I was reasonably good academically, and I'd like to think, over the next 30 years subsequent to that, I've impressed upon people and left, somewhat of a legacy at the various organizations that I've worked for and teams that I've led. So applied that practical knowledge into reality, and a lot of those things, I remember them like they happened yesterday. they're so imprinted on your mind.
So Doug, where did you go from Firestone?
I came up to Johannesburg. I took a transfer, and Nick, I always wanted to get into the marketing area, and the way those days was via sales. So I took a dealer salesman position in Johannesburg, and I understand, back to my earlier point, we hadn't travelled extensively as a family. We'd gone on a few holidays, but certainly taking a holiday was not a common thing for us. So to come to Johannesburg, and it wasn't the first time, it was probably the 3rd or 4th time I'd been here at that time, was a big adjustment. Now, you must understand, those are the days of map books. We didn't have GPS and sat-nav and this type of stuff. Now you go, the upside is I had a company car for the first time. I had a little 1600 Opel Kadett. which was a lot better than my previous car. And I had a map book, and I had one of the biggest territories in Johannesburg. And then you covered, from the East Rand, the West Rand, it was north, south. And it was an interesting exercise getting your way around Johannesburg with a map book, trying to sell car tires. And that was the start into what then became, a sort of more classical marketing career.
So from the car industry, when did you move into the cell phone industry?
Yeah, I went via pages, and a lot of, it depends who's listening to this. A lot of youngsters will probably not understand what a pager is. It was a little thing that you put on your belt, and it used to vibrate and beep and tell you had a message, and then you'd phone into a call center, and some person would tell you, Nick, you've got an appointment, or you've got whatever. So it was the forerunner to the cell phone of today. So I worked at a company, Radiospur, for a few years into the paging business, and then my big break came in 1994 when I joined the Nashua Group, right at the start of cellular. So again, for those of you who know the South African cellular history, it was April 1994 that cellular was switched on, and I joined in January. So it was just the run up to that, and so most of my career has been spent in the cell phone and communications business.
So, Doug, we met, I think, in the run-up to 2010.
Yeah, we did.
And you did have an involvement in 2010, and obviously you had a big involvement in sport. Can you tell us more?
Nick, I've always been, as a marketer, I always looked at four things, to do four things. And when I say marketing, into leadership, because marketing, and I want to make the point, it's not, in my view, a department that sits out there and makes the ads and puts prices on the product. It's an integral part of the business, and the four things that I'd always do is have an element of brand building, an element of sponsorship, and some of it's sport, it can be cultural, art, whatever, an element of product, in other words, new product releases, innovation, diversification, etc., and then retail, the pricing part of. And you and I had met around about staff engagement. We were talking about and using lessons from sport, because a lot of people are lovers of sport, or even if they don't love sport, they're knowledgeable of it, and they have an understanding of the mechanic of sport. It's often time-based. There's a certain type of outcome, win, draw, lose in many cases, and people have to work towards a common goal over that period of time. And you and I worked in the lead up to the 2010 World Cup, and it was I look back fondly at that time, because it was just a great thing to do. It was an unbelievable time for South Africa, as we all know, and we all experienced. I mean, you wrote books and topics about it, but it was a great time to unify South Africa. Using sport, and soccer was just the particular sport of that day. And so you and I did some work, and then subsequent, and even before that, we've done a lot of work with different sports teams. So I've worked, and I've been fortunate enough to have worked with many of the top sportsmen in South Africa, and sportswomen for that matter. And currently at Cell C, our big flagship sponsorship is the Cell C Sharks, the rugby team, who are the current Currie Cup champions. And so we've worked with them, but as I say, a lot of other codes and things through the years.
So today, Doug, you're the marketing director for Cell C. Can you maybe share a couple of highlights of your Cell C career?
It's been an interesting ride, Nick, and I think I think the challenge there has always been to go up for the consumer, and although we didn't call it a challenger brand mindset, I think the correct terminology these days is a challenger brand. And I've spent quite a bit of time working with a consultancy out of London called Eat Big Fish, and what they talk about is, and they only work with challenger brands. Now, challenger brands aren't necessarily just small brands that started yesterday. They can be big companies, like New Balance, the running shoe company is an example, 105-year-old company, and they see themselves as a challenger. PepsiCo in the United States see themselves as a challenger. And so I think what we did is, and I try to inculcate in the mindset of a lot of the people who worked with me and alongside me, is a challenger brand mindset, one of self-belief. Be careful not to get arrogant, but have enough confidence to be able to have a go. And we had an expression, and still have it, Celsi, have a go. What is the worst that can happen? Back yourself in situations, and part of that was to bring down costs for the consumer. And again, even today, there's still an ongoing battle around certain costs, but certainly for many years that I was at Cell C, we led that price war. We went up and we spoke to CASA, the regulator, about tariffing, etc., etc. So a lot of our work was in the sort of people's champion consumer brand space, as opposed to, say, perhaps a market leader who has a different positioning. So our positioning was always that, trying to make it better, trying to ask why not, can it be better, why is it so, etc., etc. And I think, and even prior to that, if I look back at my career in the Nasher Group and at Nasher Mobile, a lot of that work as well was around challenging. I'll give you an example, and if we could just step back, when I joined, as I say, at Nasher at that stage was the market leader in photocopiers and fax machines. And then this new thing called cell phones had just come out. And so even internally, I had to fight, and our area had to fight for their moment in the sun. Over years, though, it became a bigger and bigger part of the business. And again, so there was almost an internal challenger mindset, but certainly an external challenger mindset when we redefined the office automation category, because a lot of competitors at that stage, Panasonic, Canon, Minolta, etc., big formidable competitors in office automation, did not necessarily move into other parts of the business. And again, the examples are global in terms of when do you move, when do you stay, how do you change, where do you diversify, etc., etc. And then back into National Mobile, the big challenge there was up against the networks, and at one stage there were 17 service providers, and at the end there were only 2 service providers remaining. National Mobile was one of the last 2 to go, bought up by the networks at that stage. So our mindset was always one of doing better for the consumer, and the consumer promise there was choice and service, and those were the 2 things that we really focused all of our attention on, was offering choice of all the networks, and then really excellent service to the consumer.
Now, Doug, looking back over your career, would you say there was a major turning point, or maybe a number of turning points where you had a choice and you could have gone in a different direction, but you decided to take your career this way?
Yeah, I think there were a number. And again, I just in summary, from my experience at Firestone, a major turning point there was, do I move to Johannesburg or not? And which I did, and I'm grateful for that. And then, probably the biggest moment of my career was joining Nasher, the Nasher Group. And as I said prior to that, there was a saying at Nasher, and it said, "Join Nasher and see the world." And I couldn't believe this. We travelled the world. It was unbelievable. Whether it was a business visit, whether it was an incentive. It was a very much a sales and marketing driven culture, incentive driven, where people would get rewarded. And the leadership of Nasher, I'll always be grateful for what they did for me at that time, because it was unbelievable. As I say, I had the same opportunities as the guys who were doing a lot of turnover, the fax and copier guys. I was initially making no money. In fact, we were running at a loss until eventually you earned your stripes then. But I never felt that I had to take a back seat, and that's great leadership on behalf of the then leaders at Nasher. And I just couldn't believe that we managed to open up the horizons, and so from a global perspective, I'll always be grateful and happy for the time that I spent at Nasher as a major turning point to just show me what else was in the world. And it sounds silly, but perhaps not so. And I think one must not be blasé to think that everyone's done this, that everyone's flown on a plane, that everyone's gone overseas, that everyone's gone on a cruise ship, that everyone's seen New York. It's not always the case. And certainly at that stage, I'd never. And now I look back, but I hope that I never take those things for granted. But those life lessons were absolutely invaluable for me.
Now, Doug, what is driving you today?
Nick, like with a lot of my life has been some curiosity. I think there's an element always of fear of failure and joy of success, those 2 that go together. So I like to succeed in things. I'm scared to fail in other things, and so I anticipate and try to work through the risks of those things. And the big area of interest that I have now outside of marketing is around positive organizations, is around a great culture, a thriving workplace. And ironically, I've just returned from a course at the University of Michigan in the United States, the Ross School of Business. I'm in a world-class facility where the course was all around positive workplaces. How, as a leader, do you set that? How are you the beacon? How do you let your ego be smaller than the leadership of the team? And unfortunately, worked with great and not so great leaders, and a lot of the time it's the insecurity of the leader that bubbles over in times of pressure, and then it just results in poor leadership and chaos on the shop floor, so to speak. So this workshop was really a follow-up. I did my doctorate a few years ago in America, and I worked with Professor Kim Cameron at the University of Michigan using his framework, and I reconnected with him, went to this course, and it's really wonderful. And I'd like to share some of those lessons in time. I'm still busy going through all the material and putting the slides together and the presentations, but the synopsis, and one of the things that I heard a lot of that week was, how do you show up? How do you show up as a leader? How do you show up at work? How do you show up in your marriage? How do you show up for your kids? How do you show up for your co-workers? And so we're chatting about that whole thing of leadership, and it's so important because the leader does set the tone, does set the example. Now, you can lead from various parts of the organization, and you don't need to have boss on your business card. In fact, that's just using positional power, which is not great in my view. And so certainly part of what they talk about is being in the zone, being in the flow, understanding your place in the organization, in the world, in your system, and being the best you can at that. And I think it's that acute awareness of understanding every single day, sense checking yourself. So to answer your question, where am I going? I'd like to continue my journey on that road of creating more positive leaders, more positive organizations, and really the abundance theory of up versus down, light versus dark, yes versus no. So often, you go into meetings and workshops where somebody would shoot down an idea, but with no alternative. It will just be, I don't like it, but it should be, I don't like it, but can we consider something else? And I think that's part of that theory of positive psychology that has now gone into positive industrial psychology and then into the practical workplace. So, in a long way around, that's what drives me these days, is to understand and to try and improve in my own way the leadership performance going forward.
Now, Doc, you mentioned your doctorate. Can you quickly tell us what was the subject and what was your doctorate thesis all about?
Absolutely right. Nick, what I did is, and again, just to tell you that most of my career was in marketing, and at that stage when I did my doctorate, and I finished it ironically at 2010 around the World Cup, I chose purposefully not to do another marketing topic. In fact, I did it on organizational culture, and that's why the first time when I met Professor Cameron at the University of Michigan, and he's designed a framework. It's still one of the top academic frameworks in the world, called the Competing Values Framework. So for those of you who are interested in academia, you can look it up. It's a well-known framework to measure culture and to put people in different quadrants. So what I did is I did a study on the company that I was working with at that stage, National Mobile, in terms of where the culture is and what we needed to progress it. So I did that purposefully, and then, because as I say, most of my practical experience was in marketing, so I wanted to challenge myself academically and do something a little bit different. And it's always been an interest of mine. And so and even practically, I've used a lot of that. Sometimes directly and sometimes subconsciously in your day-to-day business.
So, Doc, let's talk about leadership. And I know it's a big question, but in your view, what does the future of leadership hold?
I think what I'd like to say, a few things. It's sort of not a one-line answer or one-word answer. There's a lot of stuff that has to happen. The first thing is, one needs to understand what is leadership, and what is a common definition, and what does it look like, and how do you know it if you see it, and how is it displayed. And often it gets confused with management of things, so you often find a person's a good manager of a technical area or a good salesman, but he's not a good sales manager and certainly not a good leader of that division to take them forward. And part of what I'd like to see the future hold for any leader is the ability to let ego not cloud your judgment. There was a book a few years ago, Ego is the Enemy, and it's absolutely true. In many, many, many cases, ego gets in the way of common sense. As a leader, you've also got to realize, point two, is that it's about the people who follow you. It's not about you. You've got to obviously be astute, you've got to have a game plan, you've got to understand the strategy, have vision, command, some respect. But certainly it's not only about the leader, it's about the whole team. And part of the objective of great leadership is to build great teams. So if you look at historically the great leaders around the world, a lot of the times they actually didn't execute the stuff themselves, but they created the framework, the culture, the environment, the safety net to have a go, to do things. So it's about understanding your place in ego. The other thing is the whole EQ IQ debate, and it's not new, but it's so critical. There are a lot of leaders or people in senior positions are bright, they're clever, technically or academically, and they understand stuff, but they have poor people skills, and they sometimes get confused by the business card that says, they're the head of or the leader of or whatever, and that's just using the positional power that I spoke about earlier, which to me is a weak basis for leadership. True leadership is about authenticity, and it's about understanding the greater purpose and moving people towards that. Trying to get people to understand the vision, and it's all easy to say vision and purpose and that. You've also got to understand that people are in jobs for different reasons. Some people really just want to wait for the next promotion. Some people want to build a career. Some people love it. Some people are in transit. Some people want to just have a paycheck. So you need to have a fundamental understanding of the people around you, and then navigate with them and try and guide them through to that common purpose of the organization. So, and EQ is such a pivotal role, and again, I've been privileged to work with wonderful leaders through the years who had a great understanding of people and knew that you could do the job. So they let you do it. They didn't interfere and meddle. And then on the other side, you get people who would micromanage you, who would suffocate people, and you'd hear a phrase like, well, I wouldn't do it this way, and that's how I would have done it. So you've got to have the confidence to create an environment that you can let people go and do stuff. It may not always be exactly like you want, and that's a coaching or a teaching moment. But certainly the future of it is to let the people go and coach from the side.
Now, Doug, what have you learned from your own journey that you consider most important for building future leaders?
Again, there's a lot of stuff that I've learned, and one is that the job title doesn't mean you're the leader. It's really sometimes a display of your ability, technical ability or otherwise. Sometimes it's a display of your tenure in an organization, and sometimes you see leadership in the strangest of places. You can see it all over the place. So it's not bound by a title, and there's again that phrase of leading without a title, and I firmly believe in that. So that is important, that you actually understand that you don't have to have the title. The other thing and again it's a phrase that I heard a while ago, hire for attitude, train for skills. Now people need to be able to do the job. Now I'm not saying just employ great people who can't do the job. That's not at all what I'm saying. What I'm saying is if you have two people who are seemingly capable at a similar level, try and employ the nicer of the two people. Now I worked for a great guy years ago, Chris Coble. And Scobes always said to us, he said, try and employ nice people who fit the culture. And that's the lesson that I've learned, is that you get some people who are very good, but they are impossible to manage or lead. They're destructive to the team, and you almost have the temptation of taking them out. The challenge, of course, and many people don't do that. You don't take your best salesman out because you're scared the rest of the team are not going to make up the sales number. So, and that's the temptation. But sometimes, you've got to have the courage of conviction. So try to choose well. Try to understand, have a fundamental understanding of what the culture is, what do you want to create, what are the team dynamics, and then put great people in that team, and then let them go forward and do their thing.
Now, Doug, when you speak to aspiring leaders, and maybe even your children, what is it you tell them they should focus on for building or for future-proofing their career?
One of the things is patience. I spoke a little earlier in today's world of social media and instant gratification. People want it now. You have to understand that sometimes you just have to wait. You've got to spend time doing the job. You look at a lot of, and we use sports as an analogy, you look at any professional sportsman, how many times they've hit a golf ball or a tennis ball or driven around a track on a Formula One car. Thousands, hundreds of thousands of times, but all you see is the match, and you think that's all they've done. It's not that. It's the repetition, it's the practice, it's the muscle memory, and it's the same with leadership, it's the same with business, it's the same with any skill that you try to craft and hone and get better at. So wait, spend your time, use every moment wisely. Understand, and as I said, in my career, I've had moments that I've hated. I've had moments that I thought it was unfair. I've had moments that I thought, but I deserve better than this. I'm smarter than this. Why me? And it only comes to you later that you look back and you say, well, maybe there was a lesson in that. So certainly for me, it is wait and be patient. Also, a link to that is don't have a sense of entitlement that, well, it's going to come. There are no turns in this thing. If you're here for a year, it's going to be my turn. That's not how the world works. And sometimes, certainly with leadership, that's the worst thing with leadership, is to have you just got to sit it out and you'll get your turn. Because all you're going to get is very average or poor leadership. So there is no such thing as an entitlement or sense of just waiting your turn. It's hard work, continuous work, and crafting and creating. And sometimes those opportunities are not in your current place of employment. That's okay. You can move and do other stuff, but while you're there, give it your best. You give it your 100%. And when you feel that you've reached a plateau, or you want to do something else, well, then move on. The other thing is do the work. Sometimes you've got to actually do the work. You can't sit and say, well, it's just going to happen, and I'm going to just flitz around a little bit, and it's all going to be cool. A lot of the time, you see people that I will call ceremonial leaders, people that are on the periphery, but they haven't done enough of the real work to have justified that position. So I think for me, it's very important to be authentic, to have done the work, to have walked the journey, and then people, I think, will follow you with a greater degree of confidence. It's not, there's a saying that says, don't tell me, show me. Show people what you've done, how you've done it, and let them then buy into that vision and move forward. The other thing, and it links to an earlier point, is know your strengths and weaknesses. Know what you're good at and know what you're not good at. Work on your weaknesses to get them up to your level, but also amplify your strengths. You know what I mean? If you're good at whatever skill it is, work on that skill and become even better at that. And so you can overachieve and be noticed on that particular skill. So those are just some of the lessons that I'd look at giving future leaders the advice, to take their career to the next level.
So Doug, as a mentor to future leaders, can you maybe share a success story or two where you mentored somebody and that person took your advice to heart?
There are numerous examples. I don't want to single out one particular person or name them by name, because I don't like to do that in that style. But there have been a few through the years, and a lot of the teams I've led have been quite young people. People that are in their first or second jobs, often in their 20s. Trying to make a go with it in the corporate world, and a lot of the time it's been formal and informal. So it was a formal meeting or a formal performance review, etc. But a lot of the time it was informal stuff, and you see a lot of the young people almost grow up in front of your eyes. They get married, they start a family, they move on, they change jobs, and so a lot of them I still stay connected with, and so people who know me and have seen some of the work that I've done. Some of those people today have got very senior jobs in corporate South Africa. Some of them are working across the African continent, and I have quite a few people who've worked with me that have made their home elsewhere in the world. As recently as last year, one of the guys who worked with me has relocated his family to London, and I'm still in touch with some of them. And a lot of the time, it's not about business, and it can be a few WhatsApps, it can be a video call, or a telephone call, or an email, and it's a lot of the time it's about personal stuff, life lessons, and I'd like to say that as a leader, for people who follow you and want to follow you, you're a leader all the time. You don't have an off day. And I made the point earlier, you've got to show up, and it's how you show up. Now sometimes people would send me a message on the weekend, and perhaps I'm in a different zone or I'm doing something else, but you've got to understand when you answer, the tone, how you're answering it. And sometimes you don't have to answer it immediately. There's no rule that says I have to answer it immediately, because maybe my frame of mind at the time is not what that person wanted, because I can see what they want in the question. It's a bit more difficult on a telephone call because it's live, and you've got to be in the zone. And I think the responsibility for a mentor is you must understand that sometimes it's not just compartments, and you need to be available and care to want to help. And that's one of the key attributes of leadership, is the burden of leadership, or the willingness of leadership. People often want to be the boss or the leader because it's cool and pays money and you get fancy perks. That's the wrong reason. You got to do it and it's about giving. It's about giving of your time, of your knowledge, of trying to make somebody better, and having the security to know that maybe they actually will be better than you. Maybe they'll earn more money than you. Maybe they'll get a bigger job than you. And let go, you know what I mean? Because your time is that moment, that interaction is your time with them. And also, your journey changes over time. As people grow in different directions, they perhaps ask different questions, and you ask different questions of them. So I've had numerous nice stories, great stories of people who have done well in both their business as well as their whole lives, their careers and their family, etc.
Now, Doug, are there any role models of leadership that you would recommend future leaders should study?
Yeah, I always like a mature participative model, and a lot of the stuff and we talk about future-proofing stuff. A lot of the models have stood the test of time. So in other words, if you look back at the old situational leadership model of task and people orientation, it's still true today. Now, we talk about great leaders. Great leaders don't let you not do the task. They are task focused, they're performance driven, they create a performance culture. It's the how. How do they do it? They do it through bringing people through. And if you're familiar with that situational leadership model, it talks about the complexity of the task and the maturity of the individual. And so your job as a leader is to get people to be more mature, to have greater skill set, to have more confidence, etc., etc. So that's an old model that I still like to use in terms of, and I don't always use it in its theoretical framework like I've discussed. You just do it subconsciously. And then into some of the stuff that interests me today, and it's not brand new, is positive psychology, is the abundance theory, is the heliotropic effect of light seeking, of understanding that you can create more by being better. Just be a better person. Business for good, the triple bottom line, people, planets, profits, stakeholder management and engagement, as opposed to the old, when I started studying, it was agency theory in university, which said that the sole goal of the firm is shareholder wealth maximization. Now, a different era. So those models are outdated, and today it's about trying to be better at the core fundamentals, and it's the how. A lot of work exists and will continue to exist around purpose, purpose-based organizations, purpose beyond profit. So I'm interested in that, but also simultaneous to that is the whole culture and the how things get done. Many companies do the same thing, and they just do them differently. And so certainly part of the lessons that I like to learn and the work that I'm reading and the stuff that I'm working through now is in the field of participation and positive psychology. And for those of you interested, this is not the only place to go, is to go to the Center for Positive Organizations at the University of Michigan. You can go on the web page, and they've got a lot of stuff, webinars, and they've got podcasts, and they've got written material that you can subscribe to or just get off the web for free, just to give you an understanding that there is a better way, and you can be a nice person to get ahead. You don't have to necessarily be a tyrant to get ahead.
Now, Doug, how can our listeners follow you, and how should they connect with you?
Nick, I've got a webpage, dougmconsultancy.co.za, so they can go there, and then to my LinkedIn page, Dr. Doug Mattheus on LinkedIn. So those are two platforms that I use, and so if people are interested in that, I regularly post my ideas and thought articles, and also comment on other people, great pieces of work that come across, particularly LinkedIn, where I'd like to contribute to that particular conversation.
And Doug, last but not least, is there one piece of advice that you would really like to convey to future leaders that they should focus on and implement in their own lives?
If I can, three pieces, not just one. We'll roll it into one, but it's the one, and I've mentioned it before, is be aware of how you show up. It's so important how you pitch up and the example that you set, because leadership, people do follow leaders, and you set the example. So when in a choice, set a good example. Okay. The second one is the golden rule. Do unto others as you'd like them to do unto you. Now, this is not something that we should be discussing. This is something that you should be taught as a kid. And a lot of people have been taught that it's just being civil, it's having good manners, and you know that to be the case. So why then, when you get into an organization, do you feel you should lose it? How did we get ourselves into that situation? So that's the second part of advice. And the third part, and equally importantly, is that very famous saying of that people will, forget what you said and what you did, but they'll never forget how you made them feel, good or bad. And I think it's so important that, and a lot of what I've been discussing with you today is how people made me feel. They made me feel great, they made me feel horrible. So be aware how you make people feel. Those for me are the three most important attributes for a leader.
Well, Doug, thank you so much for sharing your insights and your wisdom into the future of leadership and condensing your leadership lessons from, I think, 2 or 3 decades into
30 years, Nick. So yeah, thanks. It's a lot to get through, and obviously, there's always so much more to be said. But I think, if there's just 1 or 2 things people can get out of it, I'll be very, very happy and grateful. And again, thank you, for having me here as your guest, and I really appreciate that.
You're welcome, and we look forward to seeing you at the Future Leader Summit.